your sister passed away, like almost 20 years ago now at the time of this recording. She was in her early 30s. She had she was epileptic, and she went into a seizure and didn't recover, basically.
Right.
But she didn't die right away. She went into basically a vegetative state. I would argue that that person, she couldn't speak, she couldn't contribute to society. You know, as a baby, she was worth something. She grew up and she probably created value in the world. She had children, she got married, she did a bunch of things valuable in the world. And then this happened to her. And I don't think she's worth anything less just because she was incapable of performing value. Like the worth was, I think it's, from my perspective, it's consistent and static. It's not dynamic because she's worth as much as she was when she was born. At the time she ends up as, in a vegetative state, that your family decided to go ahead and, let her life run its course when that moment happened in your experience.
I can say what happened with less carefulness because it was my situation.
Yeah, it's not my situation, so I'm trying to be very careful.
Right.
I don't want to be triggering. I don't want to say anything insensitive. So please say it from your perspective.
So she had a grand mal seizure. It affected her heart and her lungs. Basically, it kind of short-circuited all of her involuntary muscles. And so everything stopped. It was in the middle of the night. So by the time the medics were able to get there, she had stopped breathing for basically, I think it was like a full 10 minutes is what they estimated. At that point, the brain it's dying, right? And it started to swell, which is what happens. And so her brain swelled to a point where she was in a persistent vegetative state, which basically means a coma that is very unlikely to be recovered from. And when she got to the hospital, they were keeping her alive with machines. And the doctors were like, listen, you don't come back from this one. Like, you just don't. And if there had been any chance that she could have recovered and come back, we would have kept her on machines. But that night, the family collectively, including her husband, decided that we were going to turn the machines off because she was effectively dead. She was brain dead and she was not going to recover, but the body was alive. And so what you're saying is, in a conversation around worth, does she have the same inherent worth in a persistent vegetative state that she will not be recovering from as she did the rest of her life?
Well, because we say as a baby, she had potential of value, like her worth would become more. We look at the potentiality at the end of her life when she's in that vegetative state. We could say, well, look at, like, it's not just inherent worth, which I believe in the value of life itself, but also all the things that she's connected to and all the people and children and husband, like all the stuff that she's connected to. So, and again, this might bear out personality types because this ostensibly is through the lens of type. I have ENFP preferences. I use authenticity, introverted feeling. So I have a tendency to focus on these kinds of things, like the worth of people, just because they are. They don't have to perform necessarily, in my mind,
right,
to have worthiness to be part of society. They can just be who they are and express exactly how they express. I'm not sure every personality type feels that way. I think some personality types look for more performative metrics for the worth of a human. And I'm not demonizing that. It's just a very different perspective than I have.
Right.
And so I, from my perspective, being my personality type, look at your sister and I say, she's worth something. The totality of her life, whether she's outputting or not, there's worth there. Now, maybe there's not value. She can't contribute value to the world after she has her seizure, but there's still worth. And so that's why I'm still, that worth growing and going more than value is still, I'm still having a hard time with this. I have to admit. Right. I feel foolish doing this publicly in front of everybody. I feel kind of like silly that I am having a hard time getting my head around these concepts. Maybe that's my ego. I'm probably saying that for ego covering reasons. So I'm not stupid, I promise. But it's this is a challenge for me. Honestly, it is.
Well, we're also talking about things that philosophers have been arguing about for thousands of years and haven't come to any,
fair enough,
definitive conclusion on.
Fair enough. I should give myself a pass a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, and we are talking very conceptually, and I'm glad you brought personality type in there because I think that's why we're saying personality type and self-worth and self-value. It's not even that I'm positing some sort of truth of the universe. It's more that I think wrestling with these questions and asking them of ourselves helps with, as mentioned, the original premise, which is self-awareness.
Yeah.
How do I actually feel about these things? What do I think about them? And I'm offering definitions. I'm offering ways of looking at them so that a person can go, I think you're dead wrong, which is great because now they're thinking about how they're thinking I'm dead wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
And
like
that's the point.
That's the point. The point is to self-assess. How do I feel about this? Do I think I have worth as somebody who goes to my job every day and maybe is a C player and
A quiet quitter.
and then comes home and, like watches my stories on Netflix and, eats a Hungry Man TV dinner and then goes to bed? And the answer is, I think so. Right. And the example that you were talking about with my sister, I think that's actually a great example because, so my sister's name is Tina. Tina had great worth to us, even in a persistent vegetative state.
Yeah.
Where it was disturbing how she looked with her head swelled. It really was. It was a kind of, it was a horrifying experience. And it took hours of agonizing decision making to get to the point where we said, no, we've got to make this choice.
Yeah.
And the reason why is even though she had great worth to us as a human, right? She was a family member, so she had high worth. She had worth as a mother. She had worth as a wife. She had worth as a sister. She had worth as a daughter. All right, she had great worth, and that was just a family. Yeah, and that's not including all her acquaintances and friendships. And the value of her life was done. She was not going to be able to output ever again. And her worth was diminished, right? She had worth to us as the memory of a relationship, but the worth she had as what was effectively was like a piece of meat that was being kept technically alive through machines. The worth was done, right? It was only going to take and the amount of expense to keep her body alive when she would literally never wake up again. And it's not one of those things. It was like, well, it could have been a miraculous recovery in 20 years. Like the doctors were like, no, that's not going to happen. It's done. Like she's basically dead. She's brain dead. She's not going to come back. And the body can technically be kept alive through the pumping of air through the lungs, etc. But the experience is over. So the worth she had to us as a person, as the memory of a relationship, it was basically like, do we have worth and value and estimation when we're dead? We do not. So what was the worth? What was the intrinsic worth of her life as somebody in that situation? Nothing.
I want to push back on that a little bit and maybe create a distinction here, and you can push back on me, pushing back on you.
Okay.
So when you say that when we're dead, we don't have worth, value, or anything, estimation or anything, well, I think that William Shakespeare has worth, and he's been dead for years. Like there's worth of the things he produced.
Yes.
So maybe what we could say is that worth is time-bound. It's asynchronous because a baby, the reason why a baby has worth is the potential of the future, time-bound potentiality.
Yes.
And your sister has worth based on her past, time-bound what she did.
Right.
But value is synchronous.
Right. You got it.
Value is here and now.
Yes.
Value happens in real time.
You got it.
And I can't really time-bind value the way I can time-bind worth.
Well, I mean, we can create value in like art or
we've been able to do as humans
or,
with technology. Yeah, but in general, like as a human, in myself, like my worth is more inherent, asynchronous.
Right.
And maybe we could say value is more synchronous.
Yeah. What am I doing right now?
So asynchronous versus synchronous. Maybe time is the factor here that helps me make that clarity in my mind.
Yeah. Well, and value is demonstrated, right? And worth doesn't always have to be demonstrated to exist, but value does.